When you enter the Edna Collins Bridge, turn off your car engine and honk 3 times. This is the only way to summon the spirit of Edna Collins, a little girl who lived in the area about 100 years ago and drowned in the river beneath the bridge. Edna loved swimming in the river, and her parents would drop her off there every day. When they returned from town, Edna's father would honk 3 times on the bridge, and she would get in the car. But one day, Edna didn't return to the car. A few hours later, they found Edna's drowned body, but the exact cause of her death was never determined. Sometime later, Edna's mother, unable to accept her daughter's death, hanged herself on the same bridge, starting the legend that the bridge is haunted by Edna and her mother's spirits. This story was well known in Putnam County, and that night, Evan told it to his new girlfriend, Linda, after turning off his car engine and honking 3 times on the Edna Collins Bridge. It was past midnight, and Evan's car was the only one around. The heavy silence and the eerie story had unnerved Linda, especially after hearing that some people had seen Edna's ghost or her handprints on their car windows. So, when Evan pretended to see a girl's shadow in the mirror trying to get into the car, Linda got very anxious and asked him to stop joking. Evan, realizing his girlfriend was scared, laughed and started the car to head home. To Evan, it was just a simple prank, but the events that began that night at his house hinted at something ominous. When Evan and Linda entered the house, Evan's little daughter, Rebecca, who usually ran to greet him, stopped after a few steps and stared at Linda before running to her room. This was the same reaction she had each time Linda visited and had kept her from meeting Rebecca properly. It seemed like Rebecca's behavior was just because she didn't like a new woman in the house. But a few hours later, Evan was woken up by Rebecca's terrified screams and realized something else was bothering her. It was around 2 a.m. when Rebecca's screams woke Evan. He rushed to her room to find her crying and scared. On nights when Evan brought a woman home, Rebecca had to sleep alone, which frightened her. Evan tried to calm Rebecca and reassure her that Linda's presence wouldn't separate them, but he soon realized that this time, Rebecca was scared of something else, a strange and frightening girl in her room. It was just a dream, Evan told Rebecca, but when Rebecca, still terrified, pointed to the old wardrobe in her room, Evan understood she still saw the girl. Pale skin, large yellow unblinking eyes, and a split head with a streak of blood on her face. These were the creepy descriptions Rebecca gave of the dead girl looking at her from the wardrobe. Evan looked at the wardrobe, its door slightly open, showing only darkness inside. He walked over and opened it completely. It was filled with old boxes that seemingly prevented the door from closing fully. When Evan showed Rebecca there was nothing in the wardrobe, she calmed down. That night, Evan stayed with Rebecca to ensure she slept peacefully. This wasn't the first time Rebecca had created a scary story when a new woman came into the house to get Evan's attention and eventually drive the woman away. So Evan didn't believe Rebecca's story about the dead girl in her room. But what Rebecca said before falling asleep stayed with him. "You brought her into the house." At that moment, Evan could only think of one thing: summoning Edna Collins' spirit. But what Rebecca described didn't resemble Edna or her mother. So, who was Rebecca talking about? It didn't take long to find out, as Evan saw her with his own eyes the next day. The next day, Rebecca didn't leave her room because Linda was still in the house. Evan brought her breakfast and then showed Linda the beautiful surroundings of the house before going to take a shower. While shaving, he heard Rebecca's terrified screams again. So startled that he ran to Rebecca's room with the razor still in his hands. Rebecca, scared and crying, was cowering in a corner, pointing to a spot: the old wardrobe. The wardrobe door was wide open, and one of the boxes had fallen to the floor. Evan was frustrated because he knew Rebecca's games, but when he went to close the wardrobe door, he was stunned. He saw yellow eyes staring at him from behind the boxes in the wardrobe. He must be imagining things. Such a thing was impossible. But when the boxes started falling one by one, and the dead girl emerged from the wardrobe, Evan, driven by fear, slashed at her with the razor in his hand. He then dropped the razor and quickly went to comfort his daughter, not realizing that the person on the floor, bleeding, was Linda. It was Linda's first night at Evan's house. From the noises and Evan's strange behavior, she had sensed something was wrong. That's why, as soon as Evan went to shower, she went to Rebecca's room to see the girl she had heard so much about. Upon entering Rebecca's room, the first thing that caught her eye was a beautiful photo of Rebecca on the bedside table. The breakfast tray Evan had brought a few hours earlier was still untouched on the bed, but Rebecca was nowhere to be seen. Linda called for Rebecca several times without receiving a response. Then, she heard a noise. The wardrobe door opening. The same wardrobe where Rebecca had seen the dead girl. Linda opened the wardrobe but saw nothing but piled up boxes. However, what she found in one of the boxes piqued her curiosity. Linda was shocked to see numerous newspaper clippings, all with similar headlines about women and girls who had gone missing months or years earlier. What shocked Linda even more was a piece of an old local newspaper with a photo of a little girl. Linda was stunned because she recognized the girl. She had just seen her picture on the bed table. It was Rebecca, who had died 5 years ago in a car accident on the Edna Collins Bridge. The driver, a 25-year-old woman, was drunk at the time and disappeared 2 years after the accident, resembling the women and girls in the newspaper clippings, white women with blonde hair and blue eyes, just like Linda. Linda was so shocked that she didn't notice the sound of the shower stopping and Evan standing behind her with a razor. Everything happened in seconds. In a trance-like state, Evan slashed Linda's throat and quickly moved to the other side of the room. Linda fell to the floor, bleeding, with shock and disbelief in her eyes. She wasn't just shocked that the man she thought would be her future husband had cut her throat, but also because of what she saw in front of her eyes, Evan holding and comforting his daughter, assuring her that no one could harm her and there was nothing to fear. But Linda saw no one but Evan. There was no trace of Rebecca. She now understood that Rebecca existed only in Evan's mind. This secret was buried forever with Linda in Evan's basement, alongside the decomposed bodies of other women and girls who had gone missing months and years before.